Yo, what's up everyone? This video is gonna be a little bit different. Usually I do stuff relating to like coding and tech and stuff like that, but this video is going to be a little bit different, as you can tell by the title. So I've been researching into like economics and finance and money and stuff like that, and I kind of wanted to make a video about what my current knowledge and understanding of it is. So this might be like, in 5 years I come back to this and it's like, okay, how much more did I learn? What was my current understanding at the time? And what is my understanding now, 5 years later? So I don't know. I just thought I'd make a video, post my notes on like economics and stuff and what I've been researching, but yeah, let's get right into it. Okay, so I have to put the curtains up because the light was kind of reflecting and it wasn't showing properly, but let's start with the barter system. So as you can see, we have two people here, Bob and Jane, right? Now Bob has 100 sheep and Jane has 100 bunches of carrots. Now Bob doesn't have carrots and Jane doesn't have sheep, so they can make an exchange of goods. And this is what we call the barter system, where we're directly exchanging goods. So Bob gives Jane 5 sheep and Jane gives Bob 5 bunches of carrots. So why does this transaction work? It works because there are mutual needs. So Bob needs carrots and Jane needs sheep. So they both have a need which each one can fulfill the other's need. So that's the only reason this transaction works. And something to note is that in this transaction, both parties receive goods at the time of the exchange. So when this transaction occurs, Bob receives the carrots and Jane receives the sheep. Okay, so here we have a different transaction. Now we've still got Bob and he has 100 sheep. And now we have Buck, and Buck has a bunch of logs. He's a log guy. Now Buck's a feisty guy, so he doesn't actually need sheep right now. But Bob desperately needs logs. So what can they do to solve this? Bob has a need, but Buck doesn't need what Bob has. Dang. Bob has a need, but Buck doesn't need what Bob has. So how do they solve this? The answer is credit. So what Bob can do is Bob can say, okay, you give me some logs, Buck. Give me like 10 logs right now. Okay, and I will give you a promise. Bob is gonna give Buck a promise, and the promise is that whenever Buck needs 10 sheep in the future, Buck can then exchange this promise for 10 sheep in the future. So this is a promise for 10 sheep, and this could be, let's say it's a paper document, right? It's a paper document that Bob gives to Buck. Now in the future, when Buck actually needs sheep, Buck can then take this document, give it to Bob, and in exchange get 10 sheep. So this promise is essentially worth 10 sheep. You can treat it as 10 sheep. That's the exchange happens, and this thing right here is what we call credit. Okay, so in this transaction, Bob needs Buck's logs, but Buck doesn't need Bob's sheep right now. So Bob gives Buck credit to redeem 10 sheep in the future. And this credit you can essentially view it as 10 sheep because it represents 10 sheep which you'll get in the future. So it's as good as 10 sheep. Okay, cool. So there is one problem with this system right now, this kind of credit system that we have. And the problem with that is, what if Bob suddenly dies? So what if Bob just ceases to exist? What happens then? Or maybe Bob runs away to a different country. What happens then? Well, the promise that Buck now has, it doesn't really mean anything, right? Because he can't redeem it in any way. It's just gone like that. His asset which he had is now completely gone. It's of no value because he can't redeem it. So what's the solution to this problem? Well, instead of exchanging a promise for 10 sheep in the future, what if Bob could give Buck some kind of item, some universal item which everyone accepts as universal, and this item can be used to purchase any other good or service in the future. So let's say Bob gives like 10 of these mystery items to Buck, right? 10 of these mystery, oh, that's 10, okay. No, that's 11, my bad. No, that's 10, okay. So 10 of those mystery items to Buck, right? And then Buck can then use these mystery items to buy whatever else he wants, right? He can just use it to buy whatever else he wants. And the reason this is better is because this promise can only be redeemed to Bob, right? Because it's a promise of 10 sheep from Bob. Only Bob will accept this promise. No other, like, if we have Jane over here and Buck tries to give this promise to Jane, Jane's not gonna care about it. Jane's not gonna care because there was no previous transaction that made Jane mandatory to owe this 10 sheep to Bob, right? So what if there was this universal item that Buck could then use elsewhere to buy whatever else he wants? And that would be the solution to this problem that we have. And as you can probably guess, this is what we would call money. This is what money is. This is a universal item that is accepted by everyone, that is portable, you know, it has to be small enough to move around everywhere, and it's something that you can use and something that everyone accepts, that has value, that can be exchanged for other goods and services. So let's talk a bit about money. So money is, it has a few characteristics, right? It has to be portable. Okay, let's say it has to be portable. So you need to be able to transport your money from point A to point B so you can make exchanges, right? So that's a pretty simple one. The second one is probably a lot more important, and that is money has to be universally accepted. All right? Money has to be universally accepted. Now, what does this mean? So let's say in the old days, people used shellfish as money. So shellfish was quite rare. You had to kind of dig for it. You had to explore areas to get shellfish. And that was what they used as money back in the day. So everyone is using shellfish. Just pretend this is a shellfish. All right? Or some kind of shell. So everyone's using that. Now, let's say one person in the economy, he suddenly decides, let's say it's Buck right here. So Buck, he's quite an audacious fellow. He decides, all right, I'm just going to use regular old stones for exchange. This doesn't work because no one else is going to accept stones in exchange for a good or a service. So Jane here, since everyone is using shellfish, Jane over here isn't going to care that Buck can give her stones because Jane doesn't accept stones. Jane can't use stones to then buy other goods and services herself. So Buck kind of just fails. So that's an important point about money. It has to be universally accepted. Now, before 1971, and like we're talking about like the modern era now. So like going to the modern era, before 1971, money was linked to gold. So money had inherent value. So we use coins, we use banknotes to store money like in value, and we'll get to that in a bit, but we use money to store value, and it was linked to gold. So you could exchange money for gold. So it was kind of grounded in something. But in 1971, Richard Nixon cut that kind of connection. I think it's called the gold standard. So he cut the gold standard, and so this no longer applied. So now people had $1 bills. People had $1 bills that didn't really mean anything, right? So this $1 bill, why is it worth $1? If you really think about it, it costs the government only like a few cents, right? A few cents to print this dollar note. But why is it worth $1? And that's where this kind of changes a bit. So in the olden days, we would use shellfish. Why? Because they were inherently rare. They were difficult to find, and that's what made them valuable, and that's what made them a good candidate for money, because they were rare. So that's also a good candidate for money. It has to be rare, at least in the olden days. But now, the government can just print money whenever it wants, and it only takes so little effort and so little value to actually print the dollar. So where does the dollar actually get its value from? It's not getting it from gold anymore. So where is it getting from? And that's where this universally accepted bit really, really becomes important, because the way this dollar gets its value is because everyone in the economy gives it value. So we all agree that this is worth $1, and we all trust that if someone gives me this piece of plastic, this dollar bill, I can then use that to buy another good or another service that's worth $1. So it's built on trust. This whole money thing is built on trust. It's only because we trust that this piece of plastic, this $1 bill, can be exchanged for another good or another service that's worth $1 that we actually use this currency. So this concept of trust is a whole nother kind of area in itself. And if you go down this route, you'll kind of get into cryptocurrency and stuff like that, which I've done a bit of research on, but let's not go into that for now. Let's kind of go, so we've talked a bit about money, a bit about the barter system, how things worked in the olden days. Let's go into some basic economics.